so long to visit. This is Harper's first trip to China since coming to office more than 3 years ago. Traveling with the Prime Minister is CTV's Bob Fife. And Bob, the Prime Minister has said he wants to use this trip as a bit of an icebreaker, but is that going to be easier said than done given this rebuke?
Well, what it shows is the Chinese have a long memory. They certainly haven't forgotten Mr. Harper's very harsh criticism of China. When he first came to power, he criticized China's human rights record. He accused China of spying in Canada, and he called for the self-determination in Taiwan and Tibet. And that obviously really angered the Chinese. And although they have rolled out the red carpet for him, the Premier of China made it quite clear that they do not want the Prime Minister or expect him to continue this kind of criticism. And guess what? The Prime Minister certainly has soft-pedaled human rights on this trip.
Is he making any headway, though, Bob? Is there any indication at all that he's getting through and that this relationship is on the mend?
It is on the mend. I mean, that was a very strong public scolding of the Prime Minister, for sure. But I think the message has been delivered, and I think that the Prime Minister gets it. Because he has really soft-pedaled the issue of human rights. In fact, saying to reporters that he did raise issues, but he said, I raise it, but his tone was very conciliatory and saying, I'm always respectful of the sovereignty of China. But having said that, you can argue that the Prime Minister, who's basically adopted the quiet diplomacy of Jean Chrétien when it comes to human rights, has had some success. They have signed a number of agreements, including one that allows Canadian companies to advertise in China, and they've also eased visa restrictions the Chinese have so that an estimated 50,000 Chinese tourists can come to Canada. The government estimates that could bring about $100 million of extra income in the Canadian economy. So I think the Chinese have demonstrated that if you are nice to them on human rights, in other words, if you talk to them quietly behind closed doors, they'll open up their market for you and be nice guys. And I think that message is driven home very clear to the Prime Minister today.
I'm interested to learn how the Chinese media is covering this visit. Is Mr. Harper making the front pages?
He made the front pages when he first came here, and they were very highly critical of him. They were critical of his previous stance on Chinese human rights record, and they were critical of him for waiting 4 years to come to China. Now, you remember the Chinese media are all state-controlled. Any word that goes in there is approved by the highest levels of the Chinese government. And there was a clear message when the Prime Minister arrived here that China was expecting him to really tone down the issue of human rights. And I think he got that message. And he responded when the Chinese Premier criticized him for taking so long. He said, well, it's been 5 years since Chinese leaders have visited Canada. But, he also later told reporters in a news conference that he understands that there is a real need for more frequent visits to China, and I expect you're going to see him coming over here a lot more often.
And what's ahead for the Prime Minister?
Tomorrow he plays tourist again a little bit. He goes to the Forbidden City, and then he flies to Shanghai, where he's going to be speaking to some business leaders.
All right, CTV's Bob Fife covering the Harper visit in China for us. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Police are checking the possible sighting of a missing Toronto teenager in southern Alberta. Alberta RCMP